and will underpin the firm.
And EFB dictatorship, and ECB dictatorship, and ECB dictatorship.
That was a protester attacking ECB President Mario Draghi earlier today at a news conference saying, quote, to end the ECB dictatorship. This kind of frustration could happen here in the U.S. if taxpayers knew how many billions of dollars are being diverted away from them and given to U.S. banks and foreign banks, including the People's Bank of China. Bob Rice is Fox Business contributing editor. He is with me now. So, Bob, how is it possible that taxpayer money is going to support U.S. banks, which I'm sure some could argue is bad enough, but also going to support foreign banks?
Yeah, it's pretty surprising. So it goes back to a change that the Fed implemented in 2008. Now, banks have always had the ability to park their idle cash at the Fed. But in 2008, the Fed got this new big idea, which is, hey, we're going to start paying interest on this idle cash. They call it excess reserves, as another tool in our toolkit for regulating monetary policy, because obviously if we're going to pay interest to the banks, then they'll be less likely to take that money out and go spend it in the real world.
So the Fed was trying to incentivize banks not to let money out into the business world, not to lend money. So saying, hey, keep it with us and we'll give you a little extra.
Right. And then they could dial up and down the interest rate they're willing to pay to change the bank's motivations for pushing it out in the real world. As you said to me earlier, hey, seemed like a great idea at the time.
Well, the idea was to give the Fed, giving itself more power, more control. And the idea, of course, seeming like a great idea at the time, was, okay, we're in a time of crisis.
Yeah.
So, hey, maybe we need a few more tools.
Exactly. Maybe
so what's the problem now?
Now we're going to need some. Well, so at the time, there was only like $2 billion of these excess reserves. So frankly, giving them that tool didn't seem like such a big deal. The issue is that today, we're looking on excess reserves at something around $2.5 trillion. And so that's the amount of money.
That's a big number, Bob.
That is a really, really big number. And it's the amount of money that the Fed is paying interest on to the banks who have those excess reserves with it. And the real problem, frankly, Deirdre, is that price tag is going to go way up from here as the Fed tries to raise interest rates.
Okay, but how does that $2.6 trillion, what does that mean? U.S. taxpayers are still somehow supporting the global financial system?
Well, sure, because the Fed, every dollar that the Fed has comes back to U.S. taxpayers, to the U.S. Treasury at the end of the year. And so this is money that is, as you said, properly being diverted from U.S. taxpayers into the accounts of U.S. banks and foreign banks. And the amounts are really pretty staggering. So like right now, we're already talking about $10 billion a year or some number like that. But St. Louis Fed President James Bullard says, hey, you know what? I'm guessing that number could go to $50 billion. And at $50 billion, that more than doubles the profitability of the largest commercial banks in the world.
So hang on to that, because if there is a Fed official actually saying and willing to put a price tag on it, I'm going to go with it's probably even higher, right? Because he's probably being forced to give a lowball estimate.
Well, it has to go higher, because here's the real conundrum. This is kind of amazing. The Fed's got itself in this situation. The Fed cannot raise interest rates in the general economy unless it pays more and more and more money on those $2.5 trillion of excess reserves.
Okay, so who? List of banks here, Bob. Who in the U.S. is benefiting? Who overseas is benefiting?
Well, they're all the big banks. They're kind of the usual suspects, right? So it's Citi, it's Wells, it's Morgan. But it's also foreign banks like Deutsche Bank and like the People's Bank of China, which, of course, gets the hackles going pretty good. I was just going
to say, on tax day, nothing like telling Americans, guess what? Your money is going to support U.S. banks and overseas banks.
Yep.
Bob, thank you very much.
Thank
Bob
you.
Rice joining me there, Fox Business contributor.